Have you ever watched a movie that gave you whiplash from scene to scene? What about a movie that tries really hard to say something it believes in, but sounds more like nonsense instead? Or a movie with an actor that you know will put on the most over-the-top and crazy performance, even if it's incredibly out of place? Well, if you haven't watched a movie with any of those things, but want to experience all of them at once, then I have great news for you. I, of course, am talking about the one and only movie that is Knowing. Now, I will say the idea behind this movie is really interesting. What if you were given a list of numbers that told you exactly how many people would die, what day it would be on, and exactly where that event would take place? It's too bad that in Knowing, it's done with terrible CGI, absurd characters, confusing tonal shifts, and an ending that is just too stupid. Honestly, it's just stupid. To fully break down why this movie is a mess, we have to set up the plot properly. Knowing opens with a little girl, Lucinda, in 1959 Massachusetts, and her school is about to put a time capsule in the ground for 50 years. The school has every kid make a drawing to put in, but instead, Lucinda starts writing down numbers like an absolute crazy person, which leads to the paper being taken away from her, and then she ends up hiding in a closet, scratching the remaining numbers into a door. Now, for whatever reason, the school decided to put this piece of paper with a bunch of random numbers into the time capsule. So 50 years later, when the capsule is opened, Nicolas Cage and his son get the paper with the numbers, and we learn that they are the location, date, and number of people that are going to die in a disaster of some kind. So now that we have the plot set up, let's talk about how this interesting premise is executed so badly. Before anyone comes at me, yes, I know this movie was made in 2009 and only had a budget of $50 million, but these effects are so bad. For reference, here are 3 movies that came out around the same time with a similar budget and way better effects. I'm not saying these are better movies necessarily, but my point still stands. But there was one scene I remembered very vividly from the theaters when I watched this, and that was the plane crash. In my head, this scene was still going to hold up, but upon rewatch, it did not. Unfortunately, the fire effects look like a green screen template you could download from YouTube. There's even one point where Nicolas Cage is basically standing in the fire and acting like there is nothing there. A little later on, there's another disaster scene involving a subway crash that matches this, but in a different way. Ignoring the fact that the only part of this crash that looks real are the people, but all of them also went to the school of Prometheus running away from things because they all run in a straight line in front of the subway car. Just like how in Prometheus, everyone ran in a straight line when the spaceship was falling down on them. Truthfully, if this movie had been rated R and they could have leaned a little more into the horror element and maybe made it a little more bloody to really sell the destruction, it would have been a lot better. But I think the worst use of CGI in this movie is the weird dream sequence the son has where he sees the whole forest on fire. In the middle of that, a bunch of animals jump out, and I swear it looks just like a PlayStation 2 cutscene before you start a mission in a burning forest. Good God, Knowing has some weird character choices, and not in a good way. Throughout this entire film, none of the characters are consistent in how they act or how they even talk to each other. The 2 leads are Nicolas Cage and Rose Byrne, and they flip-flop so much it gives you whiplash. So here's another
Magnum Speed Round.
This is going to be a quick rundown of how much these characters flip-flop throughout this movie. When Nick and Rose first meet, he stalks her into the museum and starts bombarding her with questions about her dead mom. He screams at her that they're connected, and rightfully so, she speeds off. She just randomly shows up at his house and just happens to know where he lives, and is also like, oh yeah, I believe you now. Then, when Nicolas Cage shows her the proof, she decides, oh wait, no, I don't believe you. And then the two go to some old home in the woods and she finds more proof, so she's back in. But not even 2 scenes later, she's kidnapping the kids and running away because she's decided that she doesn't believe him after all. On top of this, anytime Nicolas Cage tries to warn anyone about the impending doom, he does it in the most bizarre and insane way a human being would act. He tells a random lady with a baby to get off the subway after running through the car, chasing someone, acting like a crazy person, and bumping into her. He also yells at Rose's character multiple times and tells her over and over how they're all going to die. So in summary, a very normal person. And you might be like, but Nopus, it's because he knows it's the end of the world, and you would act the same way.
Wrong!
The biggest issue I ever have with disaster movies is when the characters are written this way. When everyone in the movie is acting like a crazy person, it becomes so oversaturated with crazy behavior, it takes away from the plot. I personally believe it's better to have one grounded character that acts like an anchor, and then surround that character with others who act crazy at varying levels. Or reverse that, a crazy main character surrounded by more normal acting people. When everyone in a movie is acting insane at the same level, it's more chaotic than it is enjoyable or even understandable. So honestly, Knowing has no idea what kind of tone it really wants to have. The director clearly was going for a more psychological, race against the clock thriller, but the writers wrote a lot of scenes that play more as horror, with jump scares and music cues that feel very out of place. There are some recurring entities that pop up throughout the movie, and they can only be heard by the kid characters, but these entities are referred to as the Whisper People. And they are very much portrayed as being this nightmarish horror element in the movie. The problem is, when you pair that with the rest of the plot, it feels kind of out of place. We go from a disaster scene of chaos and carnage to a creepy man showing up and trying to steal kids from their car? I really wish Knowing would have picked one of the genres it's trying to fit in and just leaned into that instead. This movie would work really well as just a horror movie, and it would work really well as just an end-of-the-world disaster movie too. Maybe it's just me, but the ending to this movie is so dumb. And not dumb in a funny way, it's more dumb in a dumb way.
But not funny, haha. Funny, weird.
Once Nicolas Cage learns that the numbers running out means that the world is going to be destroyed by a solar flare, that is when we finally figure out what's up with these Whisper People. It turns out they're aliens, and they went around our planet whispering to kids so they would follow them to their dog toy looking spaceship. This is so they can take all the kids and dress them in white robes, and then they just drop them off on a new Earth-like planet. There are a lot of reasons this is weird and also super creepy. The first and most obvious is the fact that they took a bunch of 9-year-olds to a planet with no way to build structures to live in, no way to get food, no way to get water, and it's also implied that they're supposed to be Adam and Eve? And this is the Garden of Eden? So does that mean that aliens want them to repopulate? But they're kids, so that's not cool. Of course, one could argue it's supposed to happen when they're older, but I would bet every kid dies before that can happen because, again, they are kids. Knowing has an ending that is trying to say something, but whatever that is gets lost in the absurdity of dropping 9-year-olds off on a planet to repopulate. So at the end of the day, as much as I love Nicolas Cage and all of his over-the-top acting, I still have to put Knowing into the just plain garbage category. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video but want to watch a more enjoyable disaster movie, check out my video on Moonfall. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment down below what movie you'd like to see me cover in the future.